Texas Tech is the team to watch in the Big 12 in 2025, and they might just be one of the top teams to watch in the entire country next season. For the first time last season, we saw the 16-team Big 12, and it was one of the craziest conference races we've probably ever seen in college football. 9 teams went into the final week of the season with a real chance at getting into the conference championship game. And Texas Tech was one of those 9 teams that had a shot at the conference championship game in the final week of the season. And although they did beat West Virginia in a 52-15 rout in that final week of the season, things just didn't shake out exactly right for them to get into the conference championship game in the end. So although they were on the outside looking in, they were the only team in the Big 12 to beat both Arizona State and Iowa State last season, the 2 conference championship game participants. So they looked at themselves and they said, if we can make a big splash in the transfer portal this upcoming offseason, we could be one of those teams in the conference championship game. And nowadays, that's really all you need. Because in the past, in the 4-team era, Big 12, besides Oklahoma for that stretch with Lincoln Riley, the Big 12 was never getting the benefit of the doubt when it came to getting into that 4-team playoff. I believe only Oklahoma, Baylor, and TCU made it in. I don't even think Baylor did. I know that Oklahoma and TCU made it in. But there were a lot of times when nobody from the Big 12 made it in, even though they had some of the best records in the country. But nowadays, you can't keep them out. If they win the conference championship game, they have a shot. And last season, we saw Arizona State come out of nowhere, go on a tear to the end of the season, and they were 1 or 2 plays away from beating Texas in that second round game after earning the bye for winning the Big 12. And although they might change that maybe in 2 seasons, this season it doesn't look like they're going to make any changes to the college football playoff seeding. So a Big 12 championship game might just get you a bye in the college football playoff yet again. And although I don't think the bye is the absolute best thing, that still puts you within 2 wins of the college football playoff national championship. But before we get too far into it, make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel. We're trying to get as many college football videos out as we can before the start of the regular season, especially Big 12 videos. So make sure that you subscribe and you're along for the ride. We're not saying anything about Texas Tech going to the national championship. We're just saying their goal is to win the Big 12. And if you win the Big 12, that puts you in the conversation. And that's the most intriguing thing about the Big 12. Someone has to win it. And with all those teams in contention going into that final week of the season, they have 3 of the top 11 teams in terms of returning production in the country coming back into 2025. That's led by the defending champion Arizona State at number 2, Texas Tech, who we're talking about, at number 4, and Baylor at number 11. All of those teams were in that final week discussion last season. So why is Texas Tech the most intriguing out of all those teams? And probably the most intriguing conference, in my opinion, outside of the top 2, the Big 10 and the SEC. And maybe even more intriguing if you're just interested in regular season football and a conference championship race. Well, Texas Tech saw the opportunity to go and make a splash in the fall or winter transfer portal, whatever they're calling it. And they did just that. They have this donor, Cody Campbell, who spent $10 million in the transfer portal this season, and they have the number 2 or number 1 class, depending on where you're looking at it, as far as transfer portal classes from the winter transfer portal. And this thing is chock full of 4-star recruits from smaller schools like the MAC, from FCS schools, and even from other Power 4 schools like Stanford, Georgia Tech, and Big 12 schools like UCF. They rebuilt their offensive line. They brought in edge rushers. They brought in wide receivers. And they are building around their quarterback, who was one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 last season. At this point, we're used to the transfer portal being a huge part of team building in college football, especially at the top levels. But what Texas Tech this year and Ole Miss last year is doing differently than what we're used to is it's not just bringing in a senior transfer quarterback that all the top schools are doing. I mean, obviously Will Howard last year, and this goes all the way back to like Russell Wilson in 2012 when he went from NC State to Wisconsin and they went to the Rose Bowl. And who did they lose to? That's right, motherfucking Ducks, just saying. But what Texas Tech is doing, similar to what Ole Miss was doing last season, is they're like, all right, we have a good quarterback. We had a great season last season, especially by our school standards. You know, Ole Miss has been a solid school for quite a few years. They had their down years, but they've been a solid school for quite a few years. Under Lane Kiffin, they're trying to become a national contender. And under Jackson Dart in 2023, they went 11-2. And they said, all right, we're going to spend a bunch of money, build around Jackson Dart in his senior season, a guy that we know that's a part of our program. We're not going to have to bring in a quarterback to our system. The quarterback's here. We're bringing in the playmakers. We're bringing in the offensive line, the defensive line. We're bringing in the other premium positions and saying, go win us a championship. Now, obviously, last season for Ole Miss, it didn't work out to have a better record. The SEC was tough last season, maybe a little less tough than it usually is, but there's always, tough conference games, and sometimes it just doesn't work out, right? But they were still 10-3. They were still in the conversation at the end of the season for getting into the college football playoff. I think Lane Kiffin needs to shut the fuck up every once in a while. He thinks he's so fucking smart and funny. But dude, you talking about the SEC is a different division of football than everybody else. No, it's not, because the SEC didn't go and win the national championship game. The SEC didn't go and kill their bowl game. So let's just pipe down Lane Kiffin. But what Texas Tech is doing is, all right, all we have to do is win the Big 12. And we have one of the better quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the Big 12. We were very successful last season. We have a bunch of players coming back. Let's go and replace what we're missing and make a run for it. Because last season, if they don't lose to TCU in what was this week, at the end of October, by 1 point on the road, they're in the conference championship game. If they don't lose to Colorado, they lose by 2 scores, but they were in it at the end of the game, and they let Colorado just run away with it. If those 2 games don't happen, one of those 2 games don't happen, they're in the conference championship game. Now, obviously, Colorado's taking a step back this next season. They have to. I mean, they're losing the Heisman Trophy winner. They'll still probably be a good team, but they have to take a step back. So there is an opening. And even if Colorado was still there, there's an opening in the Big 12. With whatever happened to make this particular Big 12, there is a chance for someone to put their foot down and say, we're the best team. It should be one of these Texas schools. It should be Baylor or TCU, who had been probably the best top 4 teams in the old Big 12, even with Texas and Oklahoma in the conference. But Texas Tech, they're one of the old stalwarts of the Big 12. They should be able to turn this around. And they've been putting money into their program, led by Cody Campbell, to make them one of the best teams, not only in the Big 12, but in the country. Now, of course, you're recruiting to Lubbock, so it's not the same as getting someone to go to Columbus or Eugene. They're not cities, but they're quite a bit different than Lubbock. But what's happening in Lubbock is they're making an NFL-style team. They have one leading booster, Cody Campbell, who's acting almost like an owner. They have a GM that is putting together NFL-style scouting. They're using the transfer portal like free agency. They're going out and they're spending money and they're taking advantage of whatever they can, because unlike before, Texas Tech can use advantages. They're not just some other team in Texas. They can be the team in the Big 12 in Texas. And that's what's the most interesting about this. I think that we're going to see this more and more. We're seeing more and more GMs coming in. We're seeing more and more of the transfer portal being important. We have revenue sharing coming up, and that's going to be very interesting to put a cap on some of these teams, and how are they going to combine that with NIL, and how does this all come together? Texas Tech is getting ahead of the game, and they've made a statement this offseason, and they said, we are going for it in 2025. And they have expectations of themselves that they're going to win the Big 12. It's not we can. It's we're going to win the Big 12. We're going to make it to the college football playoff. And it's interesting that Texas Tech makes the changes they do to kind of their organization writ large over the last couple seasons, not just implementing a GM, not just kind of building up their NIL collective structure, which is very interesting to understand. But they're making improvements to their facilities. They're making improvements to who they are as an overall organization. And if you read about it, a lot of these kids that are coming in this transfer portal were being recruited by Alabama. We're being recruited by Florida State. We're being recruited by Georgia, some of these top schools. And they decided to go to Texas because they were going to have a chance to play. They were going to go into some of the top facilities in the country, which Texas Tech has not been able to say for a very long time. They had the top facilities in the country, and they were going to make a run at the NFL. And that is such a change in college football and college sports in general. I think that it's almost something that you would see like right after the high school rule got taken out. I think it was 2005 or 2006, where they're like, no, you can no longer come directly from high school. And that's when Duke and Kentucky started taking over college basketball, because they're like, all right, come here, play for one season. We're going to get a bunch of good guys on one team in one season and make a run through college basketball. Go try to win a national championship or whatever it is. But whatever happens here, you guys are going to be the top picks in the upcoming NBA draft. And this is not that. This is not Texas Tech going and buying all the best players. But they're taking players that are like, all right, I need a season of being exposed at the top level. I need everyone to see me on national television. And maybe Texas Tech isn't going to be a bunch of games on national television, but if they win the Big 12, if they're making the run through the Big 12, they're going to get nationally televised games. I mean, look at Arizona State last season. They had their game against BYU, and I remember Ken Gillingham saying, this is the game in the country. This is the spot to be. They were selling out their stadium. They were $300 a ticket for that game. That's what the Big 12 is building right now. That's what the Big 12 kind of chemistry is putting together. Is there's going to be a game in the Big 12 race that's going to be the biggest game in the country once. Maybe the SEC gets 4 or 5 of those a season. Maybe the Big 10 gets 4 or 5 of those a season. But the Big 12 is making it so they have 1 or 2 of the biggest games of the regular season. And Texas Tech can say to these kids that are maybe going to get a spot in Georgia, maybe not going to get a spot in Georgia, maybe going to get a spot in Alabama, maybe not going to get a spot in Alabama. You will have a starring role in this Texas Tech team, and you might have 1 or 2 chances this season to have the biggest game of the regular season. You might have a chance to be in the Big 12 championship game and in a playoff game. If you come here and you're going to get paid for it, and it's just an interesting thing that they're putting together. So that's why Texas Tech is the team to watch, for sure in the Big 12 and maybe in the country. Because if this works, it didn't quite pull it off for Ole Miss, but if this works for Texas Tech, you can for sure see other teams in the Big 12 making the same kind of pitch. You can start to see other teams in the ACC start to do the same kind of thing where, okay, we're not Florida State, we're not Clemson, but Syracuse, UNC, these teams can start to make big pushes in NIL, big pushes in the transfer portal to say, all right, come here for one season. We're going to get you 1 or 2 games where if you ball out, it's going to make you a second-round pick. You're going to go from a 7th-round pick to a second-round pick if you ball out in one game. And maybe this is what the Pac-12 becomes. Maybe this is what they do to kind of get back up into the power conversation, is you make it so that your regular season has 1 or 2 of the biggest games in the country, because if you win that game, you're going to be in the Big 12 championship game. You might be in the college football playoff, and people want to see who you are. We know about Georgia. We know about Alabama. We know about Ohio State. We know about Michigan. But we want to see these teams that are going to be playing those teams in the college football playoff. And I think, as I've said before, the Big 12 is the most intriguing conference this season. If they can pull off what they did last season, and people are looking for it, nobody had any idea what to look for last season. If people are looking for the Big 12 to do what they did last season, and it's similar to what happened, where they have multiple teams going into the final week of the season, including Texas Tech, maybe Arizona State, BYU. People are talking about Baylor, and maybe one of these teams sneaks up. Maybe Utah pulls it back together. They should be one of the best teams. Maybe they pull it back together this season. Maybe West Virginia under Rich Rod gets rebuilt. Then there's something brewing in the Big 12, and Texas Tech can be at the front of that. I think it's very interesting, and I think if you want to watch the Big 12, if you want to pay attention to the Big 12, make sure that you subscribe to this channel, because we're going to be following it for sure next season. Thanks for watching that video. Make sure that you like and subscribe if you made it this far, but really, make sure that you leave a comment. I'd like to know what you think about Texas Tech next season and the Big 12 in general. If you'd like to watch more of my videos, I do have a couple Big 12 ones for you. Over here, I have my most recent one where I talked about the Colorado jersey retirements of Shadur and Travis Hunter. So make sure you check that out if you're interested in Colorado. Up here, I've got my video about a Big 12 regular season conference championship tournament. So check that out. It's an idea video that you might like. Over here, I've got my subscribe link, so click on that. Other than that, we'll see you next time. See ya!